All right, cool. The first thing I had was about setting up of the testnet for the P2P interface on Sephoria. Yo got back to me last week saying that he's spoken to other validators, encouraging them to run MEV boost so that we have more nodes running MEV boost, and thereby ensuring of more faster transaction confirmation. But I just had a question if it's possible for all those who are planning to run these bundlers and get involved in the P2P testing to become validators themselves. So if that's the case, we might need access to more Sephoria ETH. So that's something I wanted to check with Yo. I'll probably message him later on. Just trying to understand from you, Dan, how are you? Are you running Sephoria validators yourself in Alchemy with MEV Boost?
No, we currently don't run validators on any network.
Okay.
But we do have a Sepolia faucet. So if people want to run validators for this purpose, I'm sure we can help people get Sepolia ETH. But there's
Okay.
also easier ways to do that. I'm sure Yoav can also talk to different people at the EF to get Sepolia ETH too. But yeah.
Okay. So that's one option for us to consider. I was hoping Hazim will be on the call because he was the one. StackUp were running some tests to see how quick the response time was, but it was not very encouraging at that point of time. I believe more number of nodes have started to run MEV Boost, but it's still quite low when compared to mainnet. I think only 352 nodes out of 1,200 run MEV Boost. So the relay is really poor. And yeah, that's something we'd have to sort out before we can test this interface well. Hi, Shaf. I was just wondering if Dror or Yo would be joining the call.
Yeah, I joined, but I couldn't hear you, so I just fixed my headset, and
Okay.
now it's yeah, now it's fine.
Uh,
So yeah, sorry for the delay.
no, no
How are
worries.
you?
Shaf, we were just discussing a point on setting up of a test network on Sepholia for the P2P interface. And one challenges that we faced was the lack of MEV boost based validators or relays on Sepholia. Um,
Okay.
Yo did ping me last week saying that he's in. I believe Alex Stokes spoke to a lot of these validators and encouraged them to move over to run MEV Boost. But I was also wondering if we could, the teams who are testing out this can run their own validators on Sepholia with MEV Boost enabled. If that's the case, we would need access to more Sepholia ETH in order to become validators. So if Dan was suggested that Alchemy can help out, but if we could get any help from Ethereum Foundation, that will be helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk to Yoav about it. He's the one to really reach out to people over there. So of course, if we can set up something from the EF, it will be great. And obviously, if Alchemy can help as well, they obviously have the infrastructure to do it as well. So yeah, we can try to set something up. Just ping me in like Telegram later, right after the call, or me or Yoav, and we'll set something up.
All right, sounds good.
Is
Okay.
the reason that we are set on Sepolia just because Girly's going to be sunset later this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. From what I understood, it's also going to be deprecated. So
Yeah, and we'll be deprecating it too internally. We could also, if this is still a problem, Arbitrum has their send raw transaction conditional endpoint available. So when Arbitrum Sepolia starts, which is in the next few months, that could also be a reasonable place to test the P2P network. But if not everybody supports Arbitrum, Sepolia is probably a better landing zone for a test net.
Okay. No,
You're
the
not
reason is we need it almost in the immediate future, because from an Etherspot side, we've almost done with most of the integration. So we would be ready for testing on as early as possible. But if
We
Arbitrum,
could start on Arbitrum Gurley with
uh,
the Senra transaction conditional, if all the bundlers support that endpoint, which you really will need to support to work on L2s anyway.
okay,
It wouldn't be a bad place to run this.
okay, we
Drawer,
can.
you're muted. Drawer, you're muted.
Oh, yes. Hi. What I'm saying is that central transaction conditional doesn't solve the problem. Once there are multiple bundlers using the same mempool, they can't simply send transactions into the public mempool. They have to be connected directly with the node. If you have multiple nodes and each bundler ignores it and just looks at the latest transaction, all bundlers will look at the mempool, all bundlers will see all the transactions, will create transaction, and will send it. And most of them, if they use central transaction conditional, most of them, that is all except one, will get rejected. This is not what the central transaction is meant for. It is built as a help when you know that 99%, unless there is a racing condition, you know you will get included. This is the place it can be used. But if most transactions are rejected, it's soon you will be throttled down by the node. You're not expecting.
Are you suggesting then that we essentially don't have a? We're not. It's not even worth spinning up the P2P mempool on L2s.
No. If there is support for MEV boost on L2s testnet, we can.
Yeah, but that's far away. I don't think L2s are
an equivalent to MEV boost. You need a way to know that it is good to send. One of them, actually, the network that we will be able to use correctly is Arbitrum. The reason is that in Arbitrum there are no blocks. If you are listening to the sequencer, to the sequenced events, and you know that up to a single transaction that currently mid-air, you know that the bundle you are creating is valid, then you can send it into the sequencer, and the only chance that it will fail if there is a mid-air transaction just as you are sending it that will invalidate this bundle. So whether it's a 1, 2, or 10 user bundle, you pluck from the mempool, you can send it, and you can be almost sure that it will get into the blocks. Here, this is where single transaction will be beneficial, because the chances that exactly when you send this transaction, there is another transaction that affects this bundle will arrive is very low. You can do some heuristic like, wait at least a second that there is no transaction relating to any of these accounts. You don't care about other Arbitrum transactions. So on Arbitrum, it makes perfectly sense to use a single transaction conditional. It will also mean that bundles will be very small, because if there are many user ops in the bundle, many bundlers will try to compete. One of them will send a bundle on the network. The rest will see this bundle and will not try to do it themselves. So, but yes, it will work. On other networks, when there are blocks and there are timed blocks, here you must have a MEV-like API.
Yeah.
Either L2 or L1s or whatever.
With Arbitrum in that scenario, the chances of a bundler receiving a P2P or receiving a user up on the P2P network and then being able to successfully win that race is probably pretty low. Like the bundler that receives the user up from the user is probably going to be the one that will land it. So it's not even that useful to have the P2P network in that scenario.
I mean, better off we start off with the testnet rather than mainnet directly anyway. So so Cephalid, and so
unless the fees are too small, that it is
Yeah.
insufficient. But I'm trying to think, but the overhead of a bundle on especially on L2s is very tiny, because user op, if you look at the call data, overhead of a user op is like 3 or 4 words, like method sig, beneficiary, length, and such, and the rest is user op. That is, the overhead is much less than on a gas on a transaction. On a normal transaction, like the 21,000 stipend, including some overhead of account, is like less than 30K overhead for a bundle for a user op, which can be like 100, like 30% can be reduced with a bundle. On Arbitrum, it's much less. I'm trying to do the math, and it's hard for me to do the math in English during the call. I didn't calculate it before, but it's low. So so yes, what we are saying is that the mempool is nice, but it mostly will be left unused. Unless the network is very busy and there is a very large amount of transactions. As long as there is very low amount of transaction.
Dror, do you know of any L2s that are working on a PBS style NavBoost like interface, or is that's kind of far out for most L2s at this point?
I'm not up to date, but back in Tokyo, I believe, I talked with Yoav and with Optimism about it. Now, Optimism are very keen for someone else to write it for them. And I'm not sure that anyone picked up the glove and did it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure there is one. I don't know. I simply don't know. Maybe someone will, because I think Optimism is a good place for it to collect MEV. So if someone thinks it has the MEV, maybe they will write these APIs, suggest to Arbitrum, and Arbitrum will include it. But I don't know if was it advanced in any way. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe Yoav knows. I don't.
Okay. So yeah, Dror, just to give you an update, I was just discussing with Yoav last week, and he said that he has encouraged more validators and Sefolia to run MEV Boost. But we were just wondering if Ethereum Foundation can provide us with enough Sefolia ETH to run our own validators for especially for the teams who are looking to set up the testnet for the P2P interface. So that's one option available. Dan suggested Alchemy can help us with Sefolia ETH if required. So that's one option available for us to consider.
How much Sefolia ETH you need for that? Like,
I think one validator is 32 ETH, right? It depends on how many
That's
validators we plan to
between
have.
16 to 32. I think the minimum is 16, no?
I thought it was
32. You get to 16 if you're running a rocket pool or something.
okay.
I don't know. Okay, maybe you have.
I remember that the minimum is 16. The max is currently 32, and talks to increase it if I remember. But maybe I'm not recalling correctly.
And the question
Anyway,
is whether Sefolia is the same values. Like,
yeah, it doesn't matter. It's still like a lot of it probably test it that needs to be provided. So
yes.
I said that we can ask Yoav if or Tom as well, if they can connect us to someone in the EF that has some that can help us with that.
Yes.
Right.
Many validators are now on Sefolia.
There are close to 1,200, but only 300 of them, as of yesterday, run MEV Boost. I think when Hazim tested it out a few weeks back, it was not even that much, probably 50 or 60 of them maybe. So that's why the transaction confirmation times are very poor.
50% that you're talking about?
No, exact numbers.
Okay.
That's weird. Where do they test using a MEV Boost? Maybe it's all on. They're testing all on Gurley right now.
Maybe, yeah, it could.
Or they just don't even test.
They do it directly on test on prod. So
Yeah. What we can do actually for testing, we can do a MEV boost light, like bring our own proxy, which all bundlers on the testnet will say, this is our MEV boost. Everybody's using this provider. This way everybody is sending, no, sorry, it won't help. No, sorry. We need real MEV boost run with
yeah.
300 out of 1200 isn't that bad though. I mean,
but I think that number came up only over the past week or so.
Yeah.
So we've not verified or validated how effective it has been recently, but we should probably do that. But it would still help if we were to run our own validators, because at least then for sure the transactions, the bundler submits would get processed quickly.
Yes, and what is the block rate?
I don't know. Let me check. 7 to 8 seconds, I guess.
7?
Yeah, close to 7 to 8 seconds.
Okay.
Right. So the next point was to discuss Dan's proposal on the alt mempool for USDC. One of the first, I defer to you, Dan, but I think before we agree on that, the one discussion or one debate that we had was whether we move over to the original proposal of having the configuration as a JSON rather than YAML, which actually helps us in configurability or programmatically configuring a bundler. So that's something we'd have to agree on. And Dan, I'll leave it to you. How do you want to take this discussion forward?
Yeah, sure. So with regards to JSON versus YAML, I think most programming, most languages have packages that will parse both JSON and YAML into the same representation in code. So I don't really care between JSON and YAML. I just chose JSON.
The reason I didn't want JSON is that it is not something. Alt mempool is not something that programmatical. It is more textual. It more reflects code of a bundler in order to support. It's not data only. So I agree that it would be nice to be parsable, but it's not that you can go and just parse the JSON. The emphasis is the text in it and what it means, and the data is secondary. That's why I said, okay, I agree on the formal structure, and YAML is more human-friendly, which meaning, look, you need more to read the text than read values.
Yeah. So I actually,
by the way, one more thing about what we were doing in the past weeks, thinking what whitelisting means. Right now, I'm tending to suggest, we're still debating, even not whitelisting by addresses, but whitelisting by interfaces, which, but we need to accompany them with a mechanism in the bundles themselves to make sure that the rules cannot be.
You mean whitelisting by rules?
Yes.
By allowing rules, yes. Okay.
Yes,
so
the rules of the bundler. Okay. What whitelisting does? Because whitelisting can do whatever it likes in the code, and we need to add the code in the bundler to handle this whitelisting. At first, we thought about addresses, which is it's quite limiting in terms of how you validate it, how you add an entity. I'm trying to get into the idea that you will whitelist by specific methods, and for tokens, which is the most common used case, just say valid tokens, and you will have addresses of tokens, and which says as long as this token is used only through these APIs, and actually this is what whitelist means, you are only allowed to use this address through the valid method sigs of a token, and some other restrictions like the parameters must include this and that. As long as this is the rule that is applied by the bundler, we very easily can add tokens, and secondly, would protect against malicious entities. That is, even if a token, we found out that some token was trying to be malicious and got sneaked away into the whitelist, it cannot do too much harm. This is where we are aiming.
So if I understand that correctly, then it probably helps if this exceptions or to the rule are parsable, right? Provide configurable via the configuration setting. That would give the flexibility for any bundler implementation to support any number of alt mempools that they want to support just by tweaking the configuration setting.
That's true always. What I'm saying is that what an alt mempool configuration will be, because Dan's suggestion was let's support whitelisting storage cells and such.
Okay.
Opcode specific. Yes, there are some things. Some of our work, internal work, was a lot of the debates whether we need whitelisting. We thought maybe we can do without whitelisting. Can we just run rules on the actual user ops and make sure they can't be malicious? Currently, it seems that it is impossible. That is, we cannot create strict enough rules that will prevent a malicious paymaster and or malicious token to abuse the system, which means we need whitelisting. We need to do some whitelisting. This is unfortunate. I prefer the way that we can do without, but we're still not there. Maybe we will, but right now, I want to be able to whitelist token addresses. Actually,
so let me give a little more context into my proposal here. I think part of where this came from is I was like, I want to get USDC to work in paymasters on all of the networks we support. And it turned out that on every L2, USDC is slightly different. So it has a different address, it has different opcodes that it uses, it has different storage cells that it accesses, storage slots that it accesses. So it turned out that in that scenario, when you're just trying to whitelist storage slots and opcodes and whatnot, then it made sense that the rules were the same across, like getting it to work across N networks, all of the rules were the same. So it made sense to do that programmatically so that I could write a simple little JSON blob and put it into my configuration for a particular network and then deploy the bundler against that without having to kind of put custom code into the bundler for each network. If it does turn out that all we need to do is just put in a token address and that's fine, and we don't need any other sort of exceptions, any other whitelisting, then we wouldn't need these rules. But it does seem like there's going to be a need for something more than just token whitelisting. And so what I've found is that, like, for the bundler code to be simple across networks, it makes sense for rules that are possibly duplicated, it makes sense to codify them so that they can be easily tested in code for each individual bundler, and then we could even add spec tests for them over time that are just like, hey, this opcode, and it could be any opcode, because you could just write one test for an opcode whitelist, and it can be used across N networks. The proposal is super early, it's super raw. Yoav had a ton of comments on it that are like things that are, malicious. You can attack it in different ways and needs to be totally upgraded. But the idea, I think, from my mind, is to try to make it so that a bundler doesn't need to implement new code each time we want to spin up a new mempool. And so ideally that would be through some sort of configuration. And it's not always going to work. There's going to be custom rules on custom networks for crazy things that we might want to do. And there's not everything's going to be able to be codified into a particular rule. And it might need kind of hacks in bundlers on different networks to make things work. But as much as we can distill these down into codifiable rules that can be easily tested and used across networks, I think we should strive for that.
I completely agree. The reason I didn't want too early to define these interfaces, because it is very easy to fall into a trap and think, look, this rule is super useful for my use case, and it's okay because it's very confined. Let's add it because I think it's okay. We fall into the trap many times ourselves, and we have already, we already wrapped our head into thinking in malicious way to find attacks. But making it easy, look, I will just add this. It is very easy to use, and it will be good and workable. And mostly, Yoav, I agree. But we'll find attacks in ways not only to attack a token, but you have a really innocent paymaster that trusts something, and then because of your rules, you allowed some malicious entity to attack this paymaster. I mean, you have an environment, out of good intention, you create a super useful feature, and paymasters start to use it, and the paymasters are okay, and everything is okay, except that you are now exposed these very good paymasters to malicious attacks. This is what we are trying to prevent. Now, having too easy to add rules mean people will start to use it because it's okay. We're trying maybe too hard. Maybe it's okay to open it and add this configuration, and later tell people, this and that configuration, never use them because it is possible to be used for attacks. That's the reason why we're very cautious about allowing this configuration as if they might open things like something easy like opcodes. It's very hard to define whether an opcode is possibly malicious or not. Like arbitrary gas parameters are malicious. We blocked gas just for this purpose, so they have a precompile that does the same. So it can be abused. That's easy. But other things like storage rules, and I'm talking out of experience. Like I worked very hard in order to allow allowance. I thought I did, and after a talk with Shachaf and Yoav, I understood that I made a mistake there. The restrictions I made weren't strong enough, and the attack we had is capable of attacking such a paymaster that trusts these rules.
So I think that the point that Dror is making is that we need to consider carefully every modification that we introduce with alt mempools, because we put a lot of work and we are still putting a lot of effort in the security mechanism behind the rules. And every time we seem to introduce a certain, relaxation of certain rules, it seems to break something, because it's a very let's put it this way, it's very easy to step on your shoes when you have so many attack vectors when you design a system. So yeah, I agree that we probably need to standardize the way to have rules added to alt mempools, and not to have to just program every time a new alt mempool is suggested, not to add just another code to the bundle itself. But again, as Dror said, it will probably take some time to iron out every detail of every alt mempool. So just take it into consideration when we add new rules.
Yeah, we need a way, pretty much as soon as the P2P mempool is up, to support these token paymasters, or else people won't use the P2P mempool.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it is for there.
Exactly.
It is for these tokens. And the white is for tokens. As I said, I'm aiming that what we will need to add is addresses of trusted tokens. as long as this, which means these addresses that support this specific method SIGs, and the restriction is that the parameters that you pass into these tokens must be one of the relevant entity. I need to formalize this. Like, if you are in a rule of one entity, that entity must be a parameter into this method SIG.
Okay.
But once you do that, you trust this token that these methods work. Okay, the bundler can accept it, and no entity can. And the important thing is that no one can abuse this rule to attack a paymaster. The only entity that can do it it's the token itself. Like, if the token become malicious and the allowance just modify arbitrary storage unrelated to the parameters, yes, it will be malicious. But this is the idea of whitelist.
Okay. So
I hope we will be able to stop there. That we will not need more than just a whitelist by method SIGs.
So probably then we keep this as a ongoing topic for discussion in the next subsequent call. And once you have arrived at your decision, we can.
What I'm working right now is on a document collecting all the rules. Right now, the rules are written in text and are spread on the EIP, in a very inconsistent way. I'm trying to create a structured file defining all the rules in the order you need to apply them, give a code to each them, give a possible attack to that. Okay, if you remove this rule, this is what can happen. Try to map them in, like the rationalization of each rule that we add there. And either as a separate document, maybe we will define it as a chapter of the EIP itself.
Okay.
And once it is solidified, of course, I will distribute it for more comments. It's in an early stage. And then we will have also the whitelist, the optional whitelisting, like of tokens and such.
All right. Thank you. I mean, if there's no further discussion on this topic, probably I'll move on to the next one. Dan, you have anything to add in this, or?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Excited to see the results of what Joe's working on.
Of course.
Thank you. So the next one, I wanted to check with a Candid team if they've had a look at the the libp2p stuff, because I've been chased by Protocol Labs on our decision. Has there been any update?
Yes. We will be doing it in Rust. I believe we have discussed this last time.
Yeah, you were looking to test the existing implementation to see if you were able to call all the necessary functions as a sidecar, and there was no issues with that setup.
Yes, I didn't. I'm not calling the functions from Python right now. A sidecar. It will be like a separate separate server. We will only get the results using maybe Unix sockets. We will do the communication between the two instances using so we will not call the B2B functions directly from Python.
Oh, okay, that's fine then. Then there's no need. So I'll probably get back to them and say that we are not looking to take over the maintenance of that particular library for now. If things change, we'll probably come back to them later on.
Sure, yes.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I think that's all I had in my agenda. If anybody else has any questions to discuss, or
I'm curious, the bundler group here, how everyone is faring on optimism with regards to the gas estimation. Has anyone added support for optimism mainnet?
Yeah, we did an Etherspot. We've tested it locally, but we've not run into any issues as such till now.
So one thing that's crazy about Optimism is it's incredibly low base fee.
Yeah.
So it like in the tens to maybe like 100 way, which means when you're trying to use pre-verification gas to charge for the L1 portion of that fee, that number can get really, really, really big. And then if a user then tries to scale their max priority fee based on what the network might suggest, you actually end up multiplying the pre-verification gas by the max priority fee. And we've had users accidentally submit like what would have been, luckily they didn't have this in their wallet at the time, but like what would have been a transaction with a gas cost of like 115 ETH. So
actually,
yeah.
No, there is a problem. You know, all these L2s have some gas problems, but I was thinking about it. You know, in the past, before 1.5.9 was there, people on mainnet were forced to estimate the gas and then the gas price that will be in the future, and have to get overcharged, because in order to get included, you must pay enough, and you sign it. The gas price might change between the time you sign and the time you send a transaction. And then 1.5.9 solves that, in that you put the maximum values and you pay the fare based on base fee and only specify priority. Okay, that's nice. Now here comes L2s. Now, in L2s, the gas price, whether it uses 1.5.9 or not, because I believe that Arbitrum still doesn't use it.
It uses it. It just doesn't take priority fees.
Yeah, but it is irrelevant. The gas price is ultra low. What is important is the L1 gas price, and the L gas price between the time you estimate the gas and the time you submit a transaction. The L2 gas price is so low, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So
I'm thinking maybe it's something we need to talk with these old L2 guys. Like, take this 1.5.9 mechanism, don't use it for your L2 gas prices at all. Restore yourself to the original gas price just before, but use the exact mechanism for the payment for the L1. And then people will, put a maximum value for the maximum value they want to use. And the base fee will fluctuate not based on 1.5.9, but based on the L1 gas price that the sequencer knows at the time. It's a mechanism that floats in the network. So it is to use it for the right purpose. Because right now they don't use it and they have the problem. Yes, the problem is much more severe for account abstraction because of the way the transaction works. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think the same problem happens to any L2 user.
Yeah, it's the same.
No, sir, actually it isn't. Because in L2, you specify gas price, but you don't pay it. They solved it like you write a gas price, but they treat it as a bid. The actual gas price you will pay will be lower. So the gas price is kind of a maximum value. This is how.
So Arbitrum and Optimism both support 1.5.9 semantics. So they both have max fee per gas, and they both charge that. The thing that's weird about the difference between the two is Optimism for L1 gas just doesn't, there's no 1.5.9 for L1 gas. It just pulls the ETH directly out of your account and doesn't even account for it like at all. It just will pull it out in the background. And then Arbitrum uses gas. It will deduct gas from your gas limit before your transaction even starts and just charge you for that. But they are different, and they both, it's made this logic behind how to calculate pre-verification gas slightly messy across the two networks. And then also, obviously, we have the issue of just you need to overbid, which we've discussed.
Yeah, I know. This is what I'm saying is that both have a two-dimensional gas, so you can either ignore or try to wrap it into the normal gas system. But both, I think, maybe I'm wrong on that, but they simply abuse and don't use 1559 because their gas prices are so low, instead of using it for the part that really needs it.
Yeah, I think Optimism abuses it, at least in compared to like how it should be used in L1. When I discussed with the Optimism team, they basically said that that base fee is only meant as on Optimism. It's only meant to prevent DOSing, and it's really not used, like it's really not meant to be like the main use of gas. It's not meant to be the main place where things get charged. That's priority fees for the sequencer, and then just L1 gas fees that they deduct directly from your account. So it's uses 1559, but it's very different than how you would expect it to be used if you're used to Ethereum.
So the sequencer uses legacy transactions to commit to L1. Is that what you're saying?
I think that what was used. Maybe they changed it. I'm not sure. I didn't go too deep, and they are both very messy in terms of what gas pricing is.
Okay.
So I can't say I really delved into it. I once looked at it in the context of GSN, because we had just the same problem. That you have to decide in advance before you even send it to the sequencer, and there's gas repayment. So you can't just rely on the fact that the network will magically take or refund you.
Right.
But it was back, is it just before or Nitro was introduced, or I'm not sure it's still relevant. Actually, it's something to bring up to them. If it is possible to, instead of not using it all 1559, use the fact that you do have those fields and apply them to the real price, because in both networks, the real price is L1 fee.
Yep.
Actually, it's true. It's on Arbitrum 1, because on Nova, for example, on Nova, it's different. The L1 prices are much lower, so the gas prices are significant.
Yeah, it's L1 fee until there's congestion in the network, and then things can spike. So that's why Optimism uses it only as a congestion mechanism, congestion control mechanism.
Okay.
Should we have a separate discussion with their team or pull them into this call, probably in the next call, maybe, just so that we are all in sync, or should we take it up separately with the individual teams?
I think we should take it up separately. I to be completely honest, based on conversations with these teams in the past with regards to account abstraction, and then I don't know, Jor, if you've had different experiences, but they don't. It's really Optimism and Arbitrum's maybe even a little bit more open, but they don't seem super interested in changing their stuff to like accommodate.
Of course, nobody is interested in changing their own stuff.
Totally. So it would make it pretty difficult without a very compelling argument to convince them to do anything, and also likely a compelling amount of usage. So we might need to make sure that, one, we have a compelling argument, and two, we wait until there's, a decent amount of people using this and getting overcharged for it, to try to fix the mechanism. I do want to consider whether there is a mechanism and that this can be done in the entry point. But Gerard, as we've talked, it might not be possible to do that in a network agnostic manner. With being able to like actually meter the L1 gas on chain as
yeah, of course.
That's something that we also try to do with GSN. It's so difficult to do between networks, especially when you have different gas calculations between L2s.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did try to have
that was an awful experience, especially before Arbitrum upgraded to Nova, and they had all the pre-compiled with different computation gas and storage gas and everything. It was a nightmare.
Well, the
Now,
compelling.
I'm wondering.
Sorry, go
ahead.
on.
Well,
No,
I was just.
Sorry, go for it then.
I guess my only thought would be is it worth potentially having different entry point addresses on different networks to account for this, where you know the entry point just points to another simple contract that you pass the user up to. It calls into the precompiles on both Optimism and Arbitrum, that figures out exactly what the L1 portion was. Because I believe those contracts are available, and so the entry point could just say, hey, here's a user up, send it off to a contract that obviously will have a different address on each network, which will mean that the entry point, well, I guess it could be set to null, and then no, there's no owner of the entry point. So no, yeah,
simulation, right? That
It could be different entry points, and different entry point means different account.
Yeah.
Because account trusts an entry point.
yeah, you're right.
You have a deployment problem. So the best thing you could have is like, for gas optimized version, you need to change an entry point on Arbitrum. So deploy a contract with normal entry point. It will always be available, normal entry point. But if you like gas optimization, switch entry point, like modify the entry point on this network so that future transaction will use this another entry point which is more gas optimized. I don't like this idea. I prefer if we could be able to find a way to stick with a single one. It would be much better.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. If you were to switch over to a different entry point with a certain GRAS precompiles available on L2s, that transaction would fail simulation, right? Because certain opcodes are disallowed in the validation.
It wouldn't be in validation.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in the validation. The validation will be normal, and then the execution will change your implementation, your either full implementation or just the address of the entry point. This is execution. And the next transaction will have to go through that entry point. And yes, bundlers will have to support, it's either a different bundler or bundler that supports to multiple entry points.
Yeah. It's a tough problem. It's been very annoying to get correct on our end across the different L2s.
Gas calculations, actually, I have an open issue. Pre-verification gas was supposed to get the right value. And for me, it's an open issue that I keep delaying it because there are always other more pressing things to do than getting the right value for estimation.
Yeah. One thing to bring up there with regards to the P2P mempool that I've noticed, and we had a customer or a user attempt to use our bundler for gas estimation and then submit it to another bundler, and our pre-verification gas calculations were off by like 200. So a very small amount. I don't know what the difference is. It doesn't really matter. It's only 200 gas. I mean, maybe it does. The bundler could lose a little bit of money if it gets that estimate, if it's underestimating. But that does pose a compatibility problem in the mempool.
For one, this is a reason why I do want a standardized way to calculate it to prevent incompatibilities.
Yeah.
The other, I need to think about the validation rules, because the fact that you are underpriced in pre-verification gas doesn't mean you will lose money. It means that on this part you might lose, but if the priority fee is enough to cover for it, maybe you will earn a bit less. Usually you will earn. Okay, we need to make it. Yes, currently we have some hard rules, and we try to make sure that the pre-verification gas is good enough. But I agree, there is a need to add some slack.
Another place I learned bundlers can make money.
One of the way to do it is like say that when you do estimate, which is the value you expect the value to have, always add a value to it. Like a bundler, by definition, will add 500 to the value it returns, and that this is a slack to allow exactly for that purpose. And users can be over smart and know about it. That's why I want to standardize this value. If you want to be over smart and remove it, you can do it. Just know that you might get into incompatibility issues because we added this value exactly for this purpose.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I considered, and I didn't go down this route of trying to figure out how it would work, but one thing that we don't account for in any of these gas calculations is actually gas refunds. which gets processed after a transaction finishes. So it's actually right now the bundler just pockets all the refunds and just makes the money off of it. So one thing you could do as a bundler is anticipate what the refund would be and then subtract that from the pre-verification.
Are going to be removed.
What is?
The refunds are going to be reduced and removed.
Well, they won't be removed for setting slots to 0 though. Self-destruct is going to be removed, but not the clearing of storage slots. At least my understanding. It might be reduced.
I think they're going to be reduced, but and even eventually removed. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I think with Burkle trees, it might be like greatly reduced. I'm not 100% sure, but
so yes.
Regardless, it's just another weird thing with gas.
Yes, we can calculate them. We might include, when we do pre-verification gas, overall calculation, them into account. But again, when we standardize the value,
Yep.
That's because the way I wanted to do it is try to check what affect the pre-verification gas. There is some fixed values, like the overall transaction fee, and with aggregation, let's leave aggregation. More area. There is the constant value for transaction. There is the per user operation, which is the cold data cost of this user operation by itself. And there is internal overhead in the handle op, which again split in 2 ways. One of them is static overhead, like the stipend, and the other is per user operation overhead. And there are a few dynamic fields inside the user op, and we did a lot of effort to make sure that they will not affect the cost, like the signature length, the paymaster and data length, and the cold data length. Now, I know they affect a little. I'm not sure about how, so I started to write a test that tried different sizes to make sure how much what is the gap between the actual gas cost and the calculated gas cost. Like to do the matrix and out of it to extract the values. Some of it are in code. There is one thing that actually you can't tell out of the user operation itself, and it will affect the cost. Like it should be paid by the verification gas, is the context size. If a paymaster returns a huge context, it will increase the overall gas. The way we wanted to mitigate that is simply say, okay, context is limited by X. Like a validation rule for a paymaster says, I'm not allowing any validation of over like 10 words, 32-byte words. You're taking too much. I don't care why. I simply drop it and then cap the amount of gas that this will cost. I think like 200 or something like. If you take about 10 entries, this is roughly how much it will. It's not too much. It's the overhead. And that before calculating even what is called a memory expansion. When you have a very large transaction, a memory expansion started to kick in. It's very, very hard to calculate it. We never got into that. We have some other things to do before that. Again, it's something that I know that has to be done.
It's not that difficult to calculate, I think, but it's just something that we didn't get to do.
To calculate, I mean, try to be able to compensate for, because you're taking a user operation. Now it depends on how many user operations are in a bundle. Because if you're alone and you're taking a 1K, 2K something, and if they are you are like the 10th or the 200th. By the way, if you look at the gas calculation on commits on the account abstraction, you will see that I will calculate single user op, 2 user ops, and this is a way to calculate how much a single user op, the delta of a single user op, and then I do the repeat it for 10 and 11. Like I want to take the over of the 11th entry compared to the overhead of the second entry. This gap should be able to tell the difference, how much like memory expansion cost. We did do in the past some optimization to make sure to take less memory and thus reduce it. And if you look at the numbers right now, the difference between the 11th and the 2nd, they're tiny. This is why I'm ignoring this problem for now. But for big user operations and big transactions, it might kick in again. This is, again, we're talking about gas. This is something that they will need to look at.
Correct. So yes, circling back to the thing, we know there's a pressing need given the discrepancies across different networks. So I think if we were to approach them as a group, we'd probably get a more favorable response than as individuals. So it need not be part of this call, but probably as an account abstraction team, we should probably approach these L2s and just nudge them to have some kind of standardization in their gas estimation across different L2 chains. So
actually, we have a channel. I have a channel that I discussed several interesting things with Arbitrum. I'll try to raise it.
Okay.
Them again. Like the way I see it, the right way to do is use the base fee and priority fee. And try to define them differently. If base fee is the basic amount and the maximum is the maximum I allow, if we can bake into this both network congestion and L1, because both are things that will affect users, like half and half or something like that, it will give a way for the network to be more fair to the users and prevent overcharging on one side in case of a counter abstraction, and less magic behind the scenes for normal transactions, which is what they do right now. Yeah. Right now, they do charging behind the scenes instead of exposing them in the transaction itself. So I'll try to write something.
Actually, I think the EIP bundlers group has representation from both Optimism and Arbitrum, as far as I know. Maybe it's a common forum for us to discuss this. I don't know. Or if you feel individually, that's fine as well.
Once we have something, maybe it's a good place to continue.
Yeah.
But
okay.
It does require looking first what Optimism are doing. What other L2s are there except Optimism? Like the ZK ones, do they have also such a? Okay. They don't put all the data on L1, so they don't have that dependency on L1 cost.
Yeah. Base is dependent on OP stack again, so yeah.
Yeah, and we haven't tried anything other than the OP chains on Arbitrum, but there's there's Polygon ZK EVM, which we haven't tried yet. And there's a few other ones that are live and have decent traffic that might be worth looking to deploy on. I don't know how they treat gas differently, but I'm sure it'll be something different, and it'll be an annoying thing to figure out.
They don't have this cold data issue that the optimistic networks have.
They have some amount. They have just a little call data, right?
Sorry?
Polygon ZK EVM does. It's they don't put the full transaction, but they do have to charge a little bit for call data. They do put some data on L1.
Yes, but it's fixed. It's fixed. It is not proportional to the size of the network, so they can cap it somewhere. Yes, they are exposed to a huge fluctuation in gas in L1. But since it's fixed, like putting a hash, a single transaction, or like bundle data of 4844, it's going to be small, it's going to be cheap. It's not a huge thing like optimistic network, which have to put a huge amount of data. Okay.
Any other questions from anyone else? Or going once, going twice? All right. So yeah, have a nice day, everyone. And yeah, thanks for the call. Speak to you next. Cheers. Bye.
All right, everyone.
Everyone.